Good evening, everybody. We're going to be starting here in just a moment. Excuse me, it's 6 o'clock. We still got a few more people, looks like, signing in, so we'll give it just another minute or two to get going. I want to apologize starting everything off tonight a little bit. I am currently doing this from my home desk. Unfortunately, we've had COVID come into our office, so we're all kind of in quarantine again. But want to just apologize for any background noise you hear. I will say, as a fun side note, you know, there's four things that are incredibly destructive to property and home all over the years. You know, the first being a tsunami. Of course, we've seen the destruction that causes. We've seen the destruction from, you know, typhoons and hurricanes. Volcanoes, of course, is another one, but the most destructive force you can have in a home is a Siberian Husky. So my Husky will likely join us for the meeting tonight, at least at some point. You'll hear her in the background howling or jumping up in my lap. So I apologize in advance for that. Yep, there she is right now. Apologize for that in advance, everybody. But as I said, we're just making some accommodations right now to take care of COVID concerns in our office. So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started here? Let me bring my presentation back up. And as we go through this, you can raise your hand over on the side. We are monitoring that. So if you have any questions, go ahead, raise your hand on the side, and then we can go ahead and recognize you. At that point, we can unmute your microphone if you have any questions. I did receive several questions in advance of today's meeting, and I do my PowerPoint when we get to the end of everything. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get going here. Well, as soon as my PowerPoint moves, I'll get going. There we go. So tonight is going to be the general question and answer session for the community vision statements. And I wanted to start off with just doing a very brief overview for everybody. And first and foremost, I want to kind of walk through some staff. A couple of them are already online joining us tonight, so they're seeing the same presentation you are, but they're here to answer any questions that you may have. Jeremy Dye is the Assistant Director out of our Cottonwood office. Kazi Hawk is our Planning Manager, and he's one of the forefront members of our team that's really spearheading this. Leah Brock is our Senior Planner. She's joining us online tonight. And then we've got Becca Sirakis, Tim Olson, and Jeff J.T. Smith also helping us out through the whole planning process. And then Andrea Shelton is working as well on this. She is in the background working as the host, so she'll come in if she sees any hands raised, anything like that. So any questions you may have, you can also go ahead and put your questions into the Q&A window, and then she'll let me know if we have any questions that come in there. So with that, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of this, as the 10,000-foot overview, and that's really the comprehensive plan. This is covering the entire county. It is required by state statute, and that's the part of the Growing Smarter Acts in the 1880s. Boy, it's been a long day. Of the 1980s and the 90s, we had Growing Smarter 1 and 2. And the comprehensive plan must be approved, re-updated every 10 years. So this is an exercise we have to go through. And comprehensive plans involve significant community outreach. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of, charrettes will be doing discussions, a lot of surveys, a lot of emails, everything. But the comprehensive plan process is a living, breathing process. Today, where we sit in December of 2020 is likely not where we're going to be thinking we're going to be ending up come, summer of 2022. I expect that this, as we go through this process, we're going to find out some things in these communities that's going to be really beneficial, things we can include in there, things we can do differently. Great ideas basically to help with the county's growth. Now, a subsection of that is the community vision statements. And the community vision statements are tools to start the discussion. We're going to get into a little bit more about how we're going to be able to use these down the line, but it's really a way for us to help get each individual community thinking about what's important in their community, as well as addressing the 8 elements of the comprehensive plan required by state law. So a lot of these slides you're going to see again, but I'm going to abbreviate them down here quite a bit. But the Board of Supervisors has provided us a recommended format right now to start with. And that is a 10-page document, give or take. With the first page being an introduction, pages 2 through 9 addressing each of the 8 elements that are required by state law, and then a summary. Now, we already touched on this a little bit, but the 2012 Comprehensive Plan on page 88 says that a community vision statement is a document created by the residents of a community. And I want to stress, this is from the residents. This is not the county. This is your individual communities meeting and telling us what's important to you. So I can't emphasize that enough. This is a community-driven exercise. It's also a tool that can be used to help evaluate land use projects. So as we move forward and applications are submitted in your individual communities, we can go ahead and use these documents to help guide the discussion. When you do your analysis, you can go back and say, you know, this was important in, you know, our vision statement when we did that 3-4 years ago, whenever it is. And it's still important today. We can bring those comments forward. As far as direction in the 2012 plan, community vision statements are not adopted by the county. Now, as we go through the process here, I kind of see that changing a little bit, but that's what I want the communities to tell us. You know, you need to tell us what, you know, the end product looks like, what it should be. We may start off with community vision statements and we may end up in community plans where we have something dramatically different, but this is a process to get the ball rolling. Page 1, I'm not going to go into detail here. This is really an introduction. You know, see what, you know, I do want to come back to this point though. Figure out as part of this process, what is important and what makes your individual community special. This is something that you're going to hear me from a lot through the whole process. I really want to hear what makes your community special. Why did you decide to move into your community? What made you make that investment, not only in your time and your energy, but your financial resources to live in the community you live in? That's important because when we talk about planning, that's what helps make every community unique. And that's, you know, one of the big things we really want to hear here. So we're starting to get a couple of questions in here. And let me go ahead and I'm gonna try to take some of these questions here. Go ahead and unmute Mr. Swanson.
Sure, I'll unmute him right now.
Hey, good evening.
Go ahead, Craig. What's your question?
My question is whether the county going to have either a Gantt chart or a Microsoft project plan or something like that that can be shared with us about how the process itself is going to be orchestrated?
So how we're going to go forward, and we're already working behind the scenes, putting all of this. We will have, by the end of January, we will have a full website up and running, which will have a constant news feed. It will have surveys. It will have all of the information being generated as one localized point to be able to have all of our communication related to the comprehensive plan there. So yes, we are going to be going forward with that. We'll have the timelines. We'll have everything else tied to that specific website. I expect it to be a highly interactive website where people can jump on, fill out, you know, comments, you know, fill out maps, because we're going to be talking maps, you know, towards later later 2021. We're going to be having a lot of discussions about specific maps and land uses. That's where all of that information is going to be coming into. What I anticipate, and that's why we're trying to have everything centralized on a website. What I anticipate here is the culmination, a plan that's created that really culminates out of thousands of public comments and community surveys and vision statements, and something that we have to bring everybody together. So that's kind of where we're going to put everything. So we'll be on a website up and running. I don't know what the domain name is going to be yet. It will be linked and everything on our website, and we'll have a redirect, so we'll be able to brand something really short with that. But our ITF is already working diligently to have that up and running. So we'll be good to go basically 1 month from today.
Right, and I'm thinking more about a detailed project plan for the project of updating the plan itself that would lay out what the deliverables are, what the timeframes are, the sequence of events that you're going to go through, just for those of us who are going to be working on vision statements and any other areas of assist, know when specific tasks are going to occur. I'm an old IT project manager, and I'm used to having a detailed project plan that lays it all out graphically in front of me.
Okay. We'll see what we can do to. Now, our public participation plan has already been approved by the Board of Supervisors, and it does outline our rough timeline, where we're going from A to B. Inside of that, having those, deliverable dates and everything, that is something we're looking for. If I fast forward to the end of this presentation, I am looking for community vision statements, at least a rough draft, the first 10 pages as we're talking, to have those into our offices by March or April. First target to get those in, because those are going to help then drive our discussions and where we go from there. I want to find the commonality among communities and be able to identify them, have direction from the advisory committee, and to start moving and then talking about the individual elements at that point. So that's where we're at.
Mr. Williams, we have a
Yes.
John Black that has a question. I can unmute him.
Right.
Okay. You mentioned in your last presentation that we were talking about having this survey. You were going to be asking, you were going to have to come up with a list of statements and have people express how much they agreed with the statement and so forth. You've sent out a list of those. We've seen those. You mentioned that you're putting up a website sometime in January, and the survey would be up there on the website. And you also ask for additional things to put on the survey. My question is, as we go forward over the next 2 years, I'm sure there's going to be new issues come up, and we'll want to add those to the survey. You talked about how this be a kind of a living process and stuff. What provisions are you making for adding to the survey on the website as we go along? In other words, if someone logs in, they don't have to answer all the old questions again. Will they be able to bring up their own answer sheet or something and then add to that, or how are you going to work that?
I don't know. It's a good question, John. So we're using Survey 123, which is a GIS-based product, and I don't know if they're going to be able to create their own account and go in and update those surveys, or if we may have to do surveys where we're just adding additional questions that we have people go in. I'll have to talk to our GIS department and see what we can do about that. But I agree, that would be great if we could have somebody log in and then go through and just update their information.
Well, if that's not possible, maybe what you could do is have a survey 1 and a survey 2 and 3. So when they, if they find out there's a survey 2 up now, they can go back and fill those in without having to go back to the other one.
Absolutely. And as I said, I don't expect, where we're at today, as we go through this process, I expect, quite frankly, probably a dozen to 24 variants on a single survey before we get to the end. If we just back the community out and we say, we got 20 or so communities, I think we're going to have probably 10, 12 to 20 individual surveys on those specific topics as we see things tend to dig down and get that additional information, as well as, in the base land use element, the transportation element, something very specific. I see we're going to have a lot of survey data before we're done. So.
Okay, Mr. Williams, I do have a Thomas Black.
Yes, Tom, go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
Yes, David, I was just wondering, how does a citizen group, become recognized to provide for a community vision statement or plan?
Okay. Basically, right now it's wide open. So if you've got enough of the community over there that's interested, we encourage them to come together organically and create your own groups. Now, in areas where we have existing groups, we're encouraging them to join those existing groups to come together. So let me use Cornville as the example. Cornville's got a community association. They're very well established in that particular community. We've had other people that have expressed interest that we've directed to engage with Cornville so that what we have is a cohesive group in that area, in that community. What we don't want to see is fractionalization. So I get, this subdivision is creating their own plan and this subdivision's creating another one. And then I got a larger community creating one. It's really about everybody coming together. So if there's specific areas, we can help direct people to those individual community groups that already exist and help them grow and expand a little bit versus creating new subgroups.
Okay, I do have a Camille Cox with her hand raised, so I'll unmute her.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, Camille. How are you?
Hi, David. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. I'd like to talk a little bit about the survey. It's kind of my professional background, and so I'm kind of struggling a little bit with the language that's in this. There are 48 questions. I don't know, I may have counted wrong, one or two, but there's about 48 questions in this survey. And about 30% of the questions I would deem to be, I'll use the term wonkish. If you're not somebody who thinks a lot about this kind of thing, and in particular thinks a lot about the region, a lot of these questions aren't going to be very comprehensive. And so my concern is that the county is probably limiting getting authentic feedback from real Joe citizens out there by putting out a survey that's not really comprehensive, questions that are a little bit wonkish, and maybe with a little bit of help could probably be rephrased in a way that would be more accessible. So my concern here is that survey itself, besides the fact that it's long, that's asking a lot for somebody to actually get to the bottom, and some of the stuff at the back end is actually maybe some of the more valuable questions. But that setting that aside, what can be done, David, so that this survey actually kind of gets vetted around the community a little bit so that it's more usable and comprehensible to the average person? So we're not getting limited participation with just people that are really into this and maybe have a vested interest in it, but we're really truly talking to everybody in the county. What can we do to?
That's why we sent it out to all of the communities yesterday for feedback. Quite frankly, and sorry, my PowerPoint keeps moving there. The questions, the ones at the back end, actually, we added those. All the previous questions, front end questions, those were all generated through other community vision statement surveys that were done the last go around. We actually took those very specifically from those other individual communities and carried them forward. As I said, this is not being driven by the county. We tried very hard to have these come from individual communities. So we took a lot of those from what had been submitted to the county previously by those communities. And I'll tell you, all of those questions came from Valley communities. But if you have recommendations, changes, anything like that, should be made, we're absolutely ready to make those changes. That's why we have the dialogue going that we have right now.
Would you be open-minded to perhaps having a roundtable? Obviously, probably not possible in person, but of those of us who are going to be working on either community plans or interested in the comprehensive, more interested in the Verde Valley land use plan or in the comprehensive of maybe working with, before this becomes real and goes out there, massaging like I said, actually kind of working the
that-
language a little. Just because it was done before doesn't mean that it was done the best it can be done.
I couldn't agree more with you, quite frankly, Camille. I think the comprehensive plan we have today is of those issues. That's why we wanted to put it out to everybody. I have no objection to doing a round table, with the caveat that given the holidays, everything else, scheduling that may be an issue, at least for a couple, 2-3 weeks, but we're happy to do that.
Well, I would love to see that happen. And I have one other question, and that is, I appreciate that you said that, you're going to put one survey out and it may seek into some deeper questions and additional surveys, tapping the community, the region, I guess is a better way to put it, the county, for even more data on it. For my community plan, our set of questions is a limited subset of this group, and then maybe some other ones to really tap into and get a sense of what's special about our community. How do you see those things coming together? And by that I mean, so the Village of Oak or the Big Park region has its own survey, Sedona has its own survey, Camp Verde has its own, Williams Valley has its own. I'm just kind of wondering how these are going to dovetail together, what your thoughts are on that.
Part of it is, we need to see, I believe we are going to find commonality in many areas where, we may be wanting to take more of a regional approach than an individual community approach. If I look at the Mayor, Spring Valley, Cordes Lakes, Bench Ranch, that whole Highway 69 area, I think we're going to behave very similarly. There may be a lot of value to combining those groups together for these discussions because I think they're out and their desires for involvement in the comprehensive plan are going to be very similar. So I think that's kind of what we want to see is what are those commonalities. We're trying to plan for all of Yavapai County. So we're planning for 8,000 square miles, not just, 30 miles of a specific community. So we've got to figure out where the commonalities lie. And do we need to look at a community approach? Do we need to look at a regional approach? Do we need to look at the whole county's approach? Getting that in is something that we can then take to the advisory committee to see what their thoughts are going to be. And then if we have to, then the planning commission and the board of supervisors so that we have a good moving forward. But without some apples to apples comparison, it makes it very difficult. So that's part of why we're trying to have each community, at least today, filling out the same survey so that we can look at those common traits and common desires. It gives us a little bit of a better informational tool to use for everybody. So.
Mr. Williams, we do have a Harvey Grady, and I will unmute him.
Okay, great. How are you this morning, Harvey? Or this evening? It's been a long day. How are you doing?
Having a glossary of terms would meet part of the need that Camille has addressed, so that specific terms like military operation area, would have its definition. Active design would have its definition, etc. It'll probably be necessary in the long run, but developing the glossary early on might be of help to address the need that Camille points out.
Absolutely. This one thing we are working on for the website. That's something we had already talked about. I'm a pilot in MOA, as a military operation, high activity of military flight, but the layman doesn't necessarily know what that means. We've got a large portion of Yavapai County that is impacted by a couple of military operation areas where there's active bombing going on for training out of Luke. So, and that is one thing, when we talk about the military, it is one thing we have to address in the comprehensive plan is those military elements. Even though we don't have a military airport, we do have operational areas. So, but that is something we have already talked internally about creating that glossary, the definitions ahead of time. And that's something that will be on the website when we get that live. Any other questions? Okay. So land use element, the land use element is planning for land use, designates proposed general distribution location, land for housing, businesses, agriculture. That's going to be one of the sections we'll need to talk about. Come on. There we go. One of the things I do want to talk about is when we talk about the land use element, I want the discussions that we get into to really include density discussions. And some of our questions already address that, but one thing the county lacks right is a land map, which will help identify specific caps for land use to say up to 2 dwelling units per acre in this area. We have to be able to create a map countywide that says this is appropriate, this isn't appropriate, commercial should go here, industrial should go there, so that we can go ahead and find that balance. That helps give the planning department and the county tools to be able to say early on to very egregious applications to say you're not in compliance. And if they want to make that application, there's a whole nother process that they have to go through for a major comprehensive plan amendment. So dwelling units is something that we want everybody to start thinking about. We are working behind the scenes, our GIS department right now, to create maps of the existing built environment, excuse me, to show exactly what the dwelling units per acre are in different communities across the county. I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised by those maps, but that gives us what the built environment is and then helps identify where undeveloped land is for future discussion as far as what needs to happen in the future, what would be good there. And it looks like Thomas Fonk just for hand. Dre, if you can unmute him.
Yeah, I have a John Black that has been waiting, and then
okay.
I also have another
I didn't see you, John.
No, it's okay.
John first. Go ahead, John.
Yes. Well, we got into a discussion today. We were having a group discussion, about half a dozen of us, about the whole statement thing and all that. And I brought up the fact that you pointed out that the county did not have a density map and how that kind of tied your hands as far as what you could do when you saw these really outrageous proposals. One of the questions that came up with was, what else will be on that map besides density? And I know you've talked a little bit about areas that have already been built and what's there. What other things can you see being on that map to answer some of the other problems that you've run into in the past?
So the land use maps traditionally are geared around scaled residential density, so 0 to something. I don't know what the top looks like yet, but it'll be 0 to something. It will also identify where commercial growth occur, where open space exists today, to identify the open space, where industrial should be, where our employment areas should be. What are we looking at for jobs in the future? It'll identify the operation areas because we have to disclose that. It's a lot of it is not only just a planning document, but it's also a disclosure document. So there are some areas, as we look at the county, I look at Page Springs as a great example. The Page Springs area has, these wonderful, wineries and vineyards that are on use permits in residentially zoned areas. So we've got this weird mix of uses in there, but quite frankly, we have an entire county industry, state industry in that area. We need to work on coming up with some unique classifications to help those areas out because they behave differently than other areas.
Well, I was
tourism. Go ahead, John.
I think that map itself could be a very good working document where people could review what the plan is going to look like. So it would be kind of an evolving document that we would put out you make updates periodically and say, take a look at this. I think that would be a very visual way to share what's going on.
And that's the intent of it. So we had discussions this last week with our GIS department, and they're working on creating the document right now, creating the map. But we are going to have a live interactive map online, and we're probably 6 or 8 months out from that point of the project. where anybody can go in and click and say, this vacant parcel here should be this. And they can, let us know what their comment to that specific parcel. And from there, then we can start looking at, what does the community think as a whole? It's going to be a graphical survey at the end of the day. But our GIS department is already working on putting that together. We're way ahead of the curve on that, thankfully. But that's what we want to be able to have those discussions. So when we get to that point, we can bring up the maps and say, what do you think the corner of X and Y should be? Should this be commercial? Should it be residential? What's the surrounding area look like? And be able to make those good land use decisions now, because those decisions will be the decisions that live with us for the next 10 years. So that's one of the things we're working heavily on right now. So we have that graphical document essentially put together so we can have those discussions. We have to do that because we got to get everything else kind of taken off the map, get those areas colored in to say this is what the built environment looks like. And then the holes are easy to fill in. So that is something we're definitely working on. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
I do have a Peggy, and I don't want to mess up her last name, but I will unmute her. Go ahead, Peggy.
Great. And we've got Mr. Bonk next, I believe.
Oh. Hi.
Okay, Peggy.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I wrote my question in the chat box, and it has to do with whether or not the county is going to be infusing accommodations and mitigation strategies into the plan for climate, and or do the individual vision statements of the communities have to put that forward in order for that to happen? Or are you going to have a separate climate action plan?
So, environmental portion to the comprehensive plan. We're asking right now for local comments on the community vision statement level related to that. But this is, I'll be honest, this is something actually I hadn't even considered yet from this point of view. So this is a good comment that we can get in now so that we look at these things as we go forward. We're all concerned about the environment and those, carbon reduction goals, and what can we do to help with that? So that's, to me, is where our comprehensive plan really comes together. But it's those types of comments. Quite frankly, I deal with the built environment so much, we don't get a chance to think about those longer term goals. So,
well, that's why I'm emphasizing. I'm emphasizing.
I appreciate you bringing it forward.
I'm emphasizing the infusion of it on the decision-making level, so that, for example, Phoenix is going over this process right now, and you can go and participate in their discussions over it too. Yeah.
I think because, while the comprehensive plan that the state law says we need to look at environmental concerns, it does not specifically put in, carbon neutral or carbon goals into that discussion process. But this absolutely fits those goals. And that's the difference between laws that were written in the 1990s that we're having to follow today versus today's reality. So thank you, Peggy, for bringing that forward. I've got it checked off on my list here, so we'll make sure we have those. And then Mr.
Yeah,
Bonk,
I do have
I think
Mr.
you're
Bonk,
next.
and I will unmute.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello again. Okay, under the land use element, it seems to be driven by densities. There's one zoning district that seems to be missing, and that is agricultural. There is no agricultural zoning under the ordinances in the is there a way for the comprehensive plan to include an agricultural zone rather than just an agricultural exemption to a land use?
So you're absolutely correct. Right now, we do not have agricultural zoning. Yavapai County works under an agricultural exemption model. And that exemption model basically says if you have more than 5 commercial acres which is 4.13 acres of land, and you have an agricultural use that meets the state law tax assessor criteria, then you are automatically exempt from the ordinance and exempt from building code. So the ranches that we have, the farms that we have, all of those become automatically exempt. I don't know that creation of a specific agricultural zone benefits anybody because the rights are already there in a very easy to achieve, low hanging fruit. They're exempt from taxes, they're exempt from building code, they're exempt from zoning ordinance. Same thing as mining rights, actually. They perform very similarly. So I don't know that there would be any interest in creating those agricultural zoning districts just because we have is, quite frankly, easier than it is to go the other way and to do a rezoning on land over to, those agricultural uses. So I actually think creating an agricultural zone may be more of a hindrance to somebody than just going through the exemption process. So
I'm looking at
did you have a specific thought related to that, or?
Looking at it from the point of view of protecting the land for the future, rather than, I understand that it's personal property and you can do with what you want within the zoning regulations, but protecting the agricultural land that we do have seems to be very important.
One of the other problems we may run into with that is with rezoning such as that, it could constitute, and I have to make the distinction now, the old Proposition 207, not to be confused with the new Proposition 207, but the old Proposition 207 may have some impact on that related to diminution of value or a taking down the line related to creation of an agricultural zone, because we don't have one right now. That may be something that would be, an issue, because right now, if I have something that's zoned RCU2A, I have a farm run on it, I have vested rights very specifically to be able to develop that land. Rezoning to an agricultural land has the potential to diminish those rights back. In doing something could constitute a diminution of value under Arizona state law. So there may be some legal issues with that, but it's certainly something we could take a look at. I believe we've got to protect the agricultural lands. There's a lot of good programs out there for conservation easements, transfers, development rights that can be used to help protect those lands in perpetuity. There's a lot of ways to get around that. Fortunately, one thing we don't see is we don't see a lot of new creation of agricultural land. I think every year we probably lose more agricultural land in everywhere than we gain, unfortunately. Even though our department is very active in granting agricultural exemptions to properties that qualify, I think we probably lose more acreage each year than we gain. And that's something that we need to take into account. So the rest of the answers I just don't. There would be a lot more research required here. Any other questions right now? Okay. So we have our land use element. We talked about densities already. Transportation. Again, this is planning for future transportation. We know there's going to be growth. We know there's going to be issues. The questions that we're really asking for here right now are really, how are your streets performing? Yeah, it was one of the things we really tried to drill down to in that survey. Environmental, as we already talked about, we need to have plan elements to protect our air quality, our water quality, and natural resources associated with proposed development. So that's something we have to look for in the plan. And how can we best mitigate that? Quite frankly, I think it is absolutely appropriate timing-wise to look at those carbon reduction goals to see what we can do there. So Peggy, thank you for bringing that one forward. I will be reaching out to Phoenix and see what information we can get on that. Water resources. This is one topic from my last two presentations that we did. This is something that's going to be very problematic to be able to do. And what we're really asking communities right now is, what is your water quality? Do you have adequate water, or do you have wells going dry? What's the current status of water in your individual communities? As far as the water resources, this is way beyond anybody's expertise. I don't think we have any hydrologists on here today. The county doesn't have a hydrologist. These are issues that have to be addressed, but I think this is something that be addressed at the ADWR level, as well as an expert coming in. So we're likely going to bring in expert resources for this. But I'd like to hear, because of the built environment that we have, do you have enough water? Does the tap go dry during the summertime? Do you have enough water in the community, but not big enough lines to deliver it? Cordes Lake suffers from that. What are those direct concerns related to water? I think, Drea, I think John Black has a question.
Yes. Okay. One thing. Okay. Generally speaking, when you're looking to manage underground water resources, the first step is to find out where you are and where you're trending. In other words, by taking depth measurements of wells, how deep is it to the water, and watching that over time, you can see if there's a gradual lowering of the water table. Is it possible that the county could somehow institute a program where they could sort of periodically take readings from wells in the area just to see what's going on?
I don't believe there's any support county to look at that. It is something that has come up with the state legislature in recent years. The legislature wanted to put meters on all of the wells, all the domestic wells across the state. I think it was 2 years ago. And that was something that was not supported. That's why I'm kind of looking for that anecdotal evidence of how is everything performing. Now, Arizona Department of Water Resources is responsible for that, and they should be paying attention to, quite frankly, what's happening with those individual water tables. The problem with water that we've seen repeatedly, and the supervisors have mentioned this in many meetings, if you ask one hydrologist how much there is, they'll say you've got a 300-year supply. And you go ask the next person and they'll say it's a 20-year supply. It's a very difficult thing, especially in trying to quantify how much water is actually in the ground. And that's one of the reasons why in state law, they actually stepped in and say that no independent hydrological studies, nor should the county become a water provider as part of this. So that's something that state law already looked at and said, the counties don't have to do this, which to me indicates they want the counties and the cities, quite frankly, to elevate that to the Department of Water Resources level.
Well, what I'm thinking really is, I mean, you're right. There's no way for us to really know the volume of the reservoirs under the ground, how much water is down there. And so it's kind of fruitless to try to estimate that. However, the one important factor is when the water level drops, wells have to be re-drilled. And it seems to me that the county could at least take a advocacy position with the state to say, we would like to be able to monitor this, and at least, even if the county's not doing it, could we at least write something into the comprehensive plan that says we're going to advocate to try to get that kind of stuff monitored, get the water levels monitored.
Well, and I think John, that's better, very appropriate for that. The other problem that we have is we cannot use water as a deciding factor for any development decision, for any rezoning. The state has stepped in. They sued Coconino County, 10, 12 years ago, and slapped Coconino County hard enough that every other, across the state of Arizona got the message to stay out of water at that point. But it's something that we're prohibited from even having the discussions related to water adequacy for a rezoning or a development related decision. I agree. I live in an area where we have people that are, have their wells going dry. And these are new wells. They went through, they drilled them, everything was great. And all of a sudden the water table dropped too much because of the drought that we're in right now. So it's something that is very concerning. We just have to be careful how we, as a county, how we look at and how we approach that. So I think it's very appropriate to say, we should support state efforts to monitor, the hydrological condition underground in these aquifers. And it gets very difficult. It really does. So I agree with you, John. Drea, do we have any more questions while we're
It
here?
looks like Mr. Bog has his hand up. I don't know if, let me unmute him.
Tom,
No,
did
it's
you
just-
have another question? Or
No, it's.
your hand was still up before?
Yeah, I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
No. Looks like maybe Harvey.
Over the past 10 years or more, the State Department of Water Resources has been severely understaffed and to some degree underfunded. So it would take a lot of political pressure to try to actually get some kind of meaningful, groundwater survey from them. So, we may have to, look around that. And because it's probably a resource that is not going to be able to deliver what the county wants.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, I say we're going to have those discussions. They may be political discussions with the state legislature. The good news is the Senate President, Karen Fann, is a local Yavapai County resident who has significant interest in these topics. So having that involvement down at the legislature absolutely can help, because it can help get that funding where it needs to be at ADWR and, get the resources the rest of us need. We're not alone in this. Every other county state has these issues, especially when you get out of the major metropolitan areas. Every single county has these same water concerns. So it's probably time for a better push at the state legislature to get DWR to, get the staffing they need to be able to handle their mandated authority. Okay. So that's water resources, open space. For this, one of the things we're looking at here of all the open space that'll be coming out on the land use map. But really, what are your community needs for open space? That's something we want to take a look at. How do we accomplish obtaining more open space as well? Is there something that, we should be looking at, acquiring specific, or should another entity be looking at that? Should we be helping push the feds to expand forest or BLM? What are those options for open space? Energy element. This is one that I think is critical today. We have to look at renewable resources. We have to look at, being able to provide those things. Again, that helps offset the carbon footprint as well, as Peggy brought up earlier. But what does that look like? Do people want wind turbines in the community? Would they prefer solar? Should we look at, I'm going blank on the term. There's a hydraulic turbines between lakes. We've seen proposals up in the National Forest for those types of activities, where they go through and create lakes and pump the water back between the lakes and the turbines. What makes sense? So with the energy element, I'd really like to know about that. We're seeing more electric cars. You'll see some questions on the survey related to charging stations. California just went, I think they demanded in 10 years there will not be a fossil fuel car sold in California 10 years from now. So we're going to see a lot of these things coming in. And what can we do now to start getting in front of that? Electric cars have got a lot of design challenges that come with them from a planning point of view. And when we get into the autonomous vehicles, now there's whole different discussions, because you no longer park cars. They're designed to orbit. They do much better orbiting a site than they do actually parking at a site. So it's the parking. It changes how the streets have to behave. So, to me, that ties into the energy element and what we should be looking at there. Cost of development. When we talk about this element here, what should development be paying for? The state legislature created such a convoluted tool in the form of impact fees when they updated and modified impact fees several years ago, that the Board of Supervisors had to vote at their last meeting to eliminate the transportation impact fee. Those fees were used to improve roads around the county. So now that that fee's gone, how should development pay for the impact to those areas? That's one of the questions that, needs to be answered. Growth areas element. This to me is critical, and this is where the land use maps really start coming in, because what's vacant? What's going to be built on in the next 10 years? What should go in those vacant parcels? What should go in different areas? How can we best accommodate those as they grow, as they go forward in each individual community? So any questions on the elements? Andrea, can you help me? I didn't see who raised their hand and who was stuck up. Who had their hand stuck up. So.
It looks like Peggy has a question, so I'm going to unmute her.
Right.
Go ahead, Peggy.
Hi, I didn't really have a question. It was more a comment. I've been listening to a lot of webinars and talks through various groups that I belong to, and really talking about the balance between the built environment and the natural ecosystem, and how, because we are so unique here in Arizona and Yavapai County and Sedona especially, we have to keep a balance, because the natural ecosystem supports our economies, not only our health. Mm-hmm. And so it's also, that's a factor. We don't need to look at the land as just vacant land, but it's an actual ecosystem.
Correct. It is. And that goes to the question, Peggy, under open space, should there be private property land purchased for preservation for that open space? Arizona is a property right state. So if somebody comes in and they say, I want to build, they have a right to build. Now, what they build, that's the question of the day. If they come in and say, I want to build, no, state law guarantees them one house on that parcel of land, and they have the right to go in and subdivide those. But what should be built there, or should that be protected? Pinnacle Peak in Scottsdale is a fantastic example. All the development started encroaching on Pinnacle Peak, so the city went in and was able to buy Pinnacle Peak and preserve it for future generations. Now you've got a wonderful trail system. It's got wonderful hiking, all of that. But up until the city purchased it, somebody could be building houses on there all day long, grading the hill, cutting roads, doing all of that. So I think, what's that balance look like? And are there key parcels that, everybody should be looking at to preserve? We've got a wonderful, partner here, the Conservancy. I don't know if they're on tonight with us or not, but that's exactly what they do. They go buy these parcels of land that are really special to be able to preserve them for future generations. So, that's one funding option to do that. But I think we have to protect our open space. And that goes to another question, though, at the end of the presentation here. It goes to another question of, we're going to have people moving here anyways. We're going to have this development activity. Should the development activity itself change? Should we be encouraging more mixed use, where you have a first floor of a building being the business, and a second floor and third floor being an apartment type of an arrangement? We see a lot of that going on right now in downtown Cottonwood. Should we be encouraging that in the county? I don't know. But, those types of things, if we do 2 apartments in that type of format, well, that's 2 fewer houses to be built down the line. So there's ways we can help accommodate a lot of that. But those are some of the questions that we would like answered from the communities. Any other questions right now?
Looks like we have Mr. Black, and I'll unmute him.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. You've been commenting how you would like to hear from the communities and what are the needs of the community, and you've talked about what should go in here and so forth. From a legal point of view, I can understand if you're rezoning, you've got to go through the whole rezoning issue if you want to build something that's maybe not compatible with that. But how much does the county have to say? I mean, for one thing, you talked about zoning, density, and saying that you could them, or I'm just wondering how much say the county would have based on the comprehensive plan and anything that was in it, saying, here's what we would like to see.
Yeah. So you broke up just a little bit, John, in the middle of that, but I think the gist of your question and statement, and the answer is, with a comprehensive plan, we can hold people to those standards because they have the right to come back in and make specific requests to modify that plan. So if we have something and they don't agree with it, then they have the right to come in. We'll be involved, everybody countywide. This will be pushed out. The property owners will have the opportunities to comment on it. But just like a rezoning, just because a property owner wants to put a nuclear power plant at a location doesn't mean the community is going to support it or that it's the right land use choice. So comprehensive plans are actually very enforceable under state law, but they work in ranges. And that's really the key. So if we have an area and we say you can build up to 4 dwellings per acre here, that guiding document, that comprehensive plan, gives us the ability to say there is your cap. And if you want to deviate, the process is to do a general plan amendment. And I apologize. I keep going back to general plans because that's what I started and did 10 years of my career in. But do a major comprehensive plan amendment. It's the same process to be able to ask to have that lifted or changed. And that's very common. Every city in Arizona has one. Every Arizona has one. We're really the outlier without that land use plan. But I don't see any issues with enforceability.
From a legal standpoint, as long as you provide a process by which they could effectively appeal what's in the comprehensive plan, you're covered legally.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions, Drea?
It looks like there are some comments in the Q&A. So it looks like, I don't know how to pronounce it, Bridget, and I will unmute her right now. Go ahead, Bridget. Oh.
Go ahead, Bridget. Are you? Well, I'm not hearing you, Bridget. I do see your question. Hold on just a moment. Let me scroll down to it. So you had a question that, is this something that our county GIS does not have already? And if we're talking about land use map, the answer is no, they don't have it. They are creating it because that's not something we ever had before. If there's something specific, a layer or something, let me know, and we can certainly answer the question. It actually looks like I've got another part to that. Would it be desirable to have a map overlay of change in groundwater over the past 5 years? Certainly would not hurt. So I don't believe our GIS department has any of that information. I believe that has probably, I would hope ADWR has that information, but I'm almost 100% sure our GIS team does not have that already. So if that's something you happen to have and could send that in, that would be great. Okay. So moving on here, I don't think we have any more questions at the moment, but moving on, we have just a simple format, everybody. It's the same format we have in our current comprehensive plan to identify goals and then objectives in your vision statements, and then recommendations. This is really where it's going to be community specific. So how does this, the recommendations, how does this really impact your community? How can we help get there? As the county, how can we help you get there? The vision statement summary, just a simple one-page summary is fine. I keep coming back on other information, what makes your community special, and what other information would be important in your community in the future. And, what can we do there? And it looks like actually Tom may have his hand up. I just saw your comment there. Hold on just a second, and let's go ahead and answer. Let's go ahead and turn Tom's mic on.
He's on.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. It's just I wanted with energy and growth. On the energy, I know we're in enterprise zones. Can we put in enterprise zones specifically for solar farms?
You know, first, I don't know if counties can do enterprise zones. That's something I would have to verify. I believe enterprise zones sit under Title IX under the city statutes, not under the county statutes. There's a distinction in regulation. All the cities are Title IX, just for a lesson. All cities, city governments are run under Title IX. All county governments are run under Title 11. And I don't believe enterprise zones exist in the counties. That's something I would have to take a look at. We've not had an issue, quite frankly, soliciting and encouraging solar. We've got one project right now that's getting ready to go into the Prescott area. They're going to the Board of Supervisors here in a few weeks for their vote. It was unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission, and they're talking about, I think the built environment is about 800 acres of solar power, which is more than enough to drive every home in Prescott Valley. So we've got that on one side. We've got another extremely large scale solar, and I don't recall the total acreage on that, but it feels like it's about 5,000 acres. And that's off I-17 and Orem Road on the Bureau of Land Management land. That one is in process right now with the feds, and then when the feds finally get to the point they're comfortable with it, that will roll into the county permit. But so far, we haven't had any issues with attracting solar. Arizona has been a very positive state financially for the companies to come into, with the mandates that we get rid of those fossil fuel driven plants, and this is a really good option. So I think we've been doing okay with that. Yeah. So I think we've been doing good with that.
Yeah, on the growth, we have a lot of state trust land, and some of that is currently under discussion in Cottonwood with their annexation. Is there a way that the county can, through the comprehensive plan, get some of that land trust set aside for open space?
No. And I say that because state land does their own thing. State land sells land off when they believe it is the best value in terms of the trust's needs. And with that, they determine everything. State land does not like anybody coming in and trying to do any planning activity on their lands, period. So that's something, I've seen through my whole career. They tend to push everybody back on that. And there is no way to protect state trust land. State land is solely for the benefit of the educational institutions. So the money they run on, they throw money into that pool when they start needing more additional interest. That's really the driving factor. Other than that, it's really more of an investment for the state. So, but when they plan it themselves, usually in concert with a large bid to go out for development. And I've not seen them ever get excited about developing anything in a quick, timely manner for what we would consider to be a reasonable time frame. We just don't usually see that. So they'll grant easements, they'll do trails, they'll do little stuff like that, non-permanent type things. But the actual land planning for that is something the state does completely. So, any other questions?
Looks like we have Mr. Swanson, and I can unmute him.
Okay, great. Craig, go ahead.
You showed examples of the goals, objectives, and recommendations that are there in the current comprehensive plan and are soliciting input in the vision statement on those. Some of the other counties in Arizona include policies and action items, either in place of or along with goals, objectives, and recommendations. In vision statements, will you accept input on policies and action items?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is solely a recommended format. wanted to put it out there so that everybody had an understanding. Whether we call it a goal, we call it a policy, I'm not overly concerned about that. I think both are enforceable, very easily in that regard. But no, we have no objections. We're just trying to get that information flowing. So no matter what we call it, it's that information that we would greatly appreciate.
Great, thank you.
You bet. Moving forward.
Mr. Williams?
Oh, yes, go ahead.
It looks like Camille Cox just raised her hand, so I will unmute her.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, David. What's the plan for eliciting responses from your survey? How are you going to promote that in the public so they know that it's there and encourage participation?
So I'm hoping a lot of it is going to be digital community mailing lists, all of that. Moving forward, though, we're going to be doing a lot of press releases. We're going to be doing radio shows, TV shows. We're going to be changing every signature line. We're going to be sending information out in every single format that I possibly can to get the message out. We'll be doing updates every month at the Board of Supervisors, trying to encourage all of this. Basically, I'm trying to get it out there as much as we possibly can, but it's going to be a multimedia type of a push.
Thank you.
You bet. So what is not in the vision statement right now is we don't need maps. I want everybody to really just focus on goals or policies, get that in there. Keep it simple for right now. That's going to be the big key. These are living, breathing documents. So this is not a final draft homework type of activity. We're really looking just for that initial feedback. So expect that these will change in your community as you go through the process over the next year and a half. And then graphics, as I said, keep it simple. Everything can be prettied up later on. Right now, I'm more concerned about community thoughts and everything are on this. We're asking for the initial drafts sometime in March or April. And I know that's going to depend a lot on individual community meetings, COVID, and everything else. But sometime in March or April is when we would really like to have these initial drafts come in. I want to remind everybody we need a second document that's going to contain the outreach and the raw results. So the meeting agendas, attendance, sign-in sheets, survey results, all of that about how you created your individual community's vision statement. That's going to be critical because we have to have documents to support the vision statements to show that it was really representative. And again, living documents. So I expect these to change. They're not going to be set in stone at all. Now, surveys, I was asking for, and I'm going to push this back just based on Camille's comments. We'll send something out and see if we can't get a good roundtable going here. I'm going to try for the first week of January if I can, but try to get some comments into us on surveys. If you have other questions, think we should word something differently, have another proposal, let us know, and we'll go ahead and get that included in there. And as soon as we get them done, if our website is not up and running yet, we will go ahead and get these posted on Facebook, on our county Facebook page and Development Services until the comprehensive plan website goes live. So we will start our push out to the public to help all the communities out as soon as possible, and then links can be shared. The links themselves will be good. The links won't change because they're going to refer back into our GIS system, not a web address, so we're good there, but we'll get all that information out to everybody. And then again, we're trying to have the surveys be an apples and apples comparison. So that's why the questions, we'd appreciate them being a county-wide type of a question as opposed to, something drilled down specific to the traffic at this intersection. Surveys, I just had them here if we wanted to talk about them at all, but I think unless I see any more hands go up, it sounds like everybody's looking good on that. And then we'll probably talk about that more at the round table here in a couple of weeks. Now, questions. I had a few questions sent before the meeting, and I wanted to go ahead and walk through a few of those. So the first question is, do we have a basic definition of a community and or suggestions on how to define a vision area? And right now, we don't have a definition of a community. This is something we're trying to just get the surveys out. We're trying to identify where those common traits are. Zip codes always work. I want to kind of mention that they don't always work to identify neighborhoods. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I've got a lot of communities that are, bisected by a major road, and one side is one zip code and the other side is another zip code. So that's not always a great thing, but what we don't want to see is a large distance between people. It should be, a little bit more tight, excuse me, kind of the built environment for your area. So that's the first question. The next question is, how do we address surrounding and interspersed state and federal lands within the vision area? Now, with this, I kind of already touched on that. We're not planning for the National Forest and for state land or BLM. We can't. That is, solely their jurisdiction. They have to do that. Now, there are some private buildings within the National Forests, and we would be working with the land use map to identify those areas and appropriate uses on the in-holdings. But the rest of the National Forest, state, city lands, all of those things, that's something they will have to plan for themselves. Now, there's a second part here where they talk about off-highway use, illegal occupancy, and dumping are common issues with little enforcement capability. I disagree, and I say that because if we have issues in the National Forest with dumping or BLM land, anything like that, Yavapai County Sheriff's Office is happy to enforce those issues. We're under contract with the National Forest to assist them. But more importantly, we can get those additional resources. So if somebody sees something happen in those areas, if you can't get a hold of BLM, I guarantee somebody on my staff can, to be able to address those enforcement type issues. Even though the land is not county jurisdiction, we can help facilitate, get those complaints over. Being an Arizona resident, one of the things, a lifelong native here, one of the things that drives me nuts that I absolutely hate is illegal dumping. If there's going to be a pet peeve for enforcement of mine, that is it. So anybody caught illegally dumping, you see that happen, let us know. Let's get the right authorities out there to deal with that and then, get it taken care of. But I hate seeing our natural open spaces, our forests, everything else like that dumped. One of the things, and we run into this from time to time, you see a septic truck driving down a forest road, call it in. Let somebody know, because we do end up with, every year, septic trucks that go down these dirt roads that dump raw sewage everywhere. So, let us know about those things. Let the sheriff's office know that it looks suspicious. This question is a really good one, and it seems to be more community specific, but how does the county view the issuance of use permits versus a rezoning? And we've got a lot of communities that, have held this strong desire to, keep rural residential zoning at all costs and then have use permits instead issued. Use permits are good, and I think they address a lot of the concerns in many, many cases, but there are still occasions where rezonings are more appropriate. The wineries in Page Springs, I'll throw this out as an example. The wineries in Page Springs are making millions of dollars of investments in those communities, and the use permits are very problematic when it comes to financing. So when we start looking at trying to encourage some of these businesses that we want to have in these areas, use permits aren't always the best route to go. When we look at solar, especially, now the one that's being done in Prescott Valley is being done as a use permit, but there's a lot of concerns from the financing point of view about making that kind of an investment in a solar field on a use permit. Yavapai County, Arizona, a great track record when it comes to enforcing use permits and standing behind those use permits, but not every jurisdiction does. And they've had issues in, states along the West Coast where they flipped back and forth on use permits that had been previously issued because there were not but because the communities no longer wanted them there. So you have people that have made tremendous investments in communities, which now, are thrown out of communities because people didn't want the solar farm anymore. They didn't want that specific use. And that's not an appropriate use for a use permit. People need to be able to build with reasonable expectation that, they have vested rights on those properties. And when we talk about large investment, I believe, reasons seem to be, probably make more sense than use permits. The next one is, my dog is joining me at the moment. The next one here, and this was a survey question, is to establish public policies to protect areas designated for business and employment from incursion by incompatible land uses. That was the question on there. And really, to me, this comes down to the mixed use question. What does everybody think about mixed use? Should we have businesses where the ground floor is the business? It's the office, it's the bakery, with the second floor and maybe the third floor being habitable, rentable space, or a warehouse type complex where it's mixed with some other things. There's Walmarts that have been built around the country that have green garden and 2 or 3 or 4 apartments on the roof of the Walmart so that the employees have a place to live while they work at Walmart and have that mixed use type of environment. Very creatively done. So I would like to know what everybody's thought is in the communities about that mixed use. It tends to densify downtown areas, tends to lead to a little later in the evening activity versus, shutting down at a set time and everybody leaving that downtown. It tends to have a little more synergy later in the evening. But what does everybody think? And then with that, what other questions does everybody have? We've had a lot of good ones so far, but what else question-wise or comment-wise does everyone have?
I don't see anybody with their hand up, or there's nothing in the Q&A. Oh, John.
It's like perfect.
In your previous meeting, I was asking about what was going to be done. We're submitting these vision statements, and ultimately the content of those vision statements will find its way into the comprehensive plan. It's the process, and I'm not sure you can answer this right now. I think you said likely they would be blended. I said, will they be blended? And you said, yes, likely they'll be blended. Will that blending be done by the advisory committee? Will it be done by staff? And what is the process that you, at this point at least, that you think would do that?
So what I see is that it would likely be blended by both staff and the advisory committee. Staff will likely be making a recommendation to the advisory committee that we're seeing trends, and then be able to have those discussions specifically with them, and then obtain direction from the advisory committee related to that. This actually comes up with another question Mr. Fortney asked me right before the meeting, and that is, how will the community groups interact with the advisory committee? And right now, we're asking the community groups to go ahead and work directly with staff so that staff can get all of that information together, aggregate it together, and then that will be going in the form of reports to the advisory committee. Just like we do right now for the Planning Commission. We take all the public comments, aggregate them together, and send that to the Planning Commission. So we're working under that same model. However, with that said, the advisory committee is a public body. So what I anticipate as well is the opportunity for the community groups to come before the advisory committee to add to staff comments, provide differing opinions, whatever their thoughts may be on that. So I do expect a good synergy between community groups, staff, and the advisory committee on several different levels. Okay.
Okay, it looks like we have Camille. Let me unmute her.
Thanks. I'm just full of questions. I've had a lot of conversations.
That's what this is for.
not just in my community, but in other surrounding communities. And could you, and forgive me if I'm asking a question that you've already talked about before, but could you just sort of flesh out who's going to be on this advisory committee? I understand that each supervisor is going to recommend one individual, so that makes 5. Who else is going to be on that committee?
So right now, the advisory committee, as approved by the Board of Supervisors, is a 10-member body. It will be 2 board members, 2 planning commissioners, 1 member from an agency with a significant interest in the plan, and it could be SIMPO or NACOG or the Forest Service, Verde Valley, VV Rio. Verde Valley Regional Economic, any one of those groups, and then 1 member from each of the individual supervisory districts.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You bet. I will say, if anybody has interest in serving on that committee, to please go ahead and send me an email or your board member an email so that we can get that information put together. Right now, I've had several people send me emails saying they're very interested in that. That information's been forwarded to the supervisor in those areas. But if you have interest, it's wide open right now. So we're soliciting any interest to serve on that committee. What other questions? Any others?
Yeah, it looks like Bridget has another one and she's in the Q&A. Let me try her again.
Go back over there.
Okay, you are unmuted, Bridget.
Yes, Bridget, go ahead.
Of workforce housing to new developments of multiple dwelling units.
Okay.
Be varied with time as we are adequate in workforce housing, but to get enough workforce housing for any new development will have high need of workforce housing with it, because all the common service that the occupants require. So demand a certain number of workforce housings be part of a developer's application.
I don't think it would be legal for us to get into a developer's application to have so many. And just to clarify, so what she's asking, I'm just going to the Q&A, because you are breaking up just a little bit again. Would it be legal for the county to tie a percentage of workforce housing to new developments of multiple dwelling units, and then the percentage with time? I don't believe that would be a lawful request, unfortunately, for the county to ask to mandate specific amounts of housing be provided for workforce housing. But this does go to a bigger discussion, and maybe would make a great survey question. Should we allow additional accessory dwelling units on smaller lots? California, to address a lot of housing, allowed accessory dwelling units, guest houses, on very small lots. I don't think there was a lot requirement anymore. So what they did is they took their built environment and then they densified that by adding in these extra guest houses. Now, we just finished, I created a program called the Home of My Own program, which is on our website, which helps with affordable housing in a rather unique way, and that we've designed so far 3 homes for people to live in, and they can come in, pick up the plans right now, pull a permit and go build that plan. So it eliminates the design cost. They're designed to be very cost effective. But workforce housing is something that we absolutely have to look at. We don't have workforce housing here. That's one of the big problems that we have right now. And what we have is outrageously expensive. Over here in the Quad Cities, you can, a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment is, $1,500 a month. When just 4 years ago, that same apartment would have been $900 a month. So the wages haven't changed that much. It's something we need to address. I'm open to any creative solutions for workforce housing. One of the big problems that I have is soliciting, encouraging staff to come into the Prescott area from other areas just for jobs. We can't recruit people from outside the area without great difficulty because they can't find jobs. And that goes for everywhere. Same thing up in the village of Oak Creek, Sedona, Cottonwood, everywhere has those workforce housing issues. So I don't think your option is a legal option. What parts of the comprehensive plan can we look at that would encourage additional workforce housing or densification? I will say right now, one of the plans that we have for the home of my own is ready to be built as a guest house. If somebody wanted to pull the plans, if they had the land to do that, they could pull it right now and build a guest house very affordably on their land to help with either generational housing or if they just needed the extra house on their property to do that. But the bigger question is, should we start allowing guest houses on smaller lots? And if we did, what should our limit be? I think that's a good question and something we need to know from the communities because that is the trend nationally right now to do that. So, what other questions do we have? Anybody?
I don't see anything.
I think Bridget's still on. Homelessness, go ahead and unmute, Bridget. Homelessness, that is a major problem we're seeing right now. One of the things that we have here in Arizona is a major squatting issue. If you own vacant raw land someplace, anywhere in the state of Arizona, you need to check your land and make sure nobody has taken it over. Adverse possession laws have changed in recent years in Arizona to make adverse possession very problematic for raw land owners. But we're seeing this everywhere. Cordes Lakes, Black Canyon, Congress, I can go into any community in this county right now and find people that have just taken over other people's land to squat on it. From a homeless point of view, where they just can't afford to be anywhere right now because of COVID, economy, or whatever the reason is, homelessness right now in the county is a major problem. And I don't know a good solution for it. If anybody has any good answers, I would love to hear it. But it's why we're trying to get home program going. We're trying to help at least create those affordable housing options for everybody to maybe eat into some of that. But any solutions, that's one of the toughest problems to solve, I think, of any community. So any other questions?
It looks like we have Peggy, and I can unmute her. Here we go.
Great.
I just had a comment in there because I had listened to a radio show this morning coming out of Maine because my son lives in Massachusetts anyway. They were talking about how COVID had caused more people to be, having to work remotely and how improving broadband in rural communities really does help the situation a lot and help people live in less expensive homes in outlying areas and not have to commute, and that cuts down on their carbon footprint. So it's like a win-win if you boost the broadband in rural Arizona.
Yeah, I agree. And our school superintendent, Tim Carter, has actually done a really good job of this. So we've gotten broadband into every library in the county, especially in the very remote rural areas. We have broadband in the communities now. And the benefit was we get it to the libraries, which now gives those broadband companies the ability to distribute into the towns now. But yeah, access to broadband is a major issue. I mean, right now I'm working from home because I got exposed to COVID at work. I'm in a mandatory quarantine. And we're seeing that quite a right now. Better than probably 80% of the development services staff is working remotely. I have very few people actually coming to the office right now because I'm trying to, protect their health, but we're also trying to protect the development industry. Because if I have all my building inspectors under our former model where they were in their bullpen every morning getting their inspections and all of that, if one of them were to have gotten sick, we would have shut down $250 million industry in this county because somebody got sick. We can't afford that. So we're doing everything we can at the county to protect everybody. But you're absolutely right. Working remote is a whole new dynamic now, and it's not going to go away. It also then changes the need for how many offices do we need? How many brick and mortar office buildings are left at that point? And then what should we revitalize those to reserve those for something else? It poses some interesting questions. And it looks like Tom's got a question.
Mr. Baum? Yeah, just a moment. There we go.
Perfect. Go ahead, Tom.
I haven't had a chance to really look close at your home of my own program. How is that protected people from abuse for short-term rentals?
Unfortunately, Arizona state law, Senate Bill 1350, which all of us fought, and I want to make this clear, every one of your county supervisors, your development services staff, all of the other counties fought that bill. We all thought it would be absolutely horrible for the impact it would have in the communities, and it was. But there is absolutely nothing we can do to stop any type of abuse for someone using these as short-term rentals. And that's the unfortunate situation. The law says any dwelling unit, which means and I want to clarify, means a permitted building, permitted home, not a travel trailer, not a teepee, can be used as a short-term rental. With that, we just have no control. There's no way to rein that in to say these can only be used. We can't prohibit the right. In other words, if they build that house, they have a right as a dwelling unit to use it. So it's better to have a few people abuse that and hopefully get more people into affordable housing, than not have that program at all. So, but it's tough. It really is.
But I was just thinking along the lines of the product, the building plans of the product, and it's a licensed product. Couldn't something be put into the license agreement, use those plans to assure that they're used for the intended purposes of long-term housing? Yeah,
unfortunately not. That is something looked at. We had the county attorney actually review those because that was one of my concerns early on, and the county just had no ability. If we were going to allow these out in the public, then we've got to treat everybody equally. So whether they use it as a workforce type housing, for somebody to get into, the schools use it to put teachers in, and we've got a lot of schools very interested in doing that. If we put it out there, we got to put it out for everybody. We couldn't put the restrictions on it, unfortunately.
That's a shame. Okay.
It is. I don't disagree. That was something at a discussion very early about that. It was just something we couldn't do. So, any other questions? Well, seeing none, what I will go ahead and do here is I will go ahead and set up a meeting here. I will shoot for the week of January for everybody. And we could drill down into these surveys very specifically. But what I would encourage everybody to do is don't wait for the meeting. Send us your comments ahead of time so that we can go ahead, make those changes immediately so that when we get to that meeting, we're all on the same page as more of a final product. But we'll go ahead and get that scheduled and then move forward from there. Unless anybody else has anything, I want to thank everybody for sharing your Thursday night with us here a little bit. And I want to wish everybody, I'll be non-politically correct, a very Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, whatever you participate in. But I really do appreciate everybody's time and going through all of these different meetings. I really genuinely appreciate everybody's time that you've spent on this, and it shows a lot for all of the community's involvement, and I really, really do appreciate that. So unless anybody has anything else, I just want to thank everybody, and you all have a very good evening.